Good afternoon, everybody. I can see a lot of you joining us today, which is just fantastic. Welcome to this special briefing for Australia for UNHCR's Leading Women Fund. I'm Trudy Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Australia for UNHCR, so it's great to have you here with us this afternoon. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're on today, and I'm imagining many of you are from all over Australia. I'm on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and pay that respect around Australia as well. Today's webinar is an introduction to Australia for UNHCR's Leading Women Fund. And we'll learn about its life-saving work supporting Syrian refugee women in Jordan. Welcome to our supporters who are joining us today. Welcome to those new people who are joining us today and wanting to learn more about this program. And a big thank you to my special guests here that I have today. Meta Carlson. Welcome. Meta's joining us from Jordan, where she is UNHCR's Head of Cash-Based Interventions. Lynn Dang. It's a very international group this afternoon. Lynn's joining us from Singapore. Lynn is a Leading Women Fund member. She's one of our wonderful board members for Australia for UNHCR and also a former refugee. And we've also got Graham Nye joining us from Sydney. Welcome, Kim. Kim's one of our founding 50 Leading Women Fund members, so that the start-off members that we had. And you'll hear more about Kim, but she is co-CEO and founder of G Diapers, and some of you may have already know all about that product. Very innovative. So today I'll give you a bit of an overview of the Leading Women Fund and what we fund. But I'll start off by saying if you have questions as we go, we welcome them. I'm not sure that we'll get to all of them if there's a huge number, but if you want to put them in the Q&A feature as we go, we'll check that and see if I can offer those questions to our wonderful panel. I'll just talk a little bit about the Leading Women Fund now and what it is funding. So in times of conflict and displacement, we know that women and girls are disproportionately affected. 80% of refugees are women and girls. They face some of the greatest challenges, from the threat of gender-based violence to forced marriages. And we've also been hearing that COVID has had a huge impact around education and accessing education and those sort of things as well. But we do know that when women and girls are empowered, they can in turn empower a whole community. For this reason, 2 years ago, Australia for UNHCR launched the Leading Women Fund to give refugee women and girls the hope and resources to build a better future for themselves and their communities. The Leading Women Fund began with 50 Australian women, just like Kim and Lynn, I think, who come from all different walks of life, but they're united in the vision to empower refugee women and girls, to help refugee mothers, grandmothers, daughters, who by their own circumstances out of their control have found themselves uprooted from their homes and facing uncertain futures. The Leading Women Fund is currently focused on providing cash assistance to Syrian women who have fled Syria's ongoing conflict, and they now live in Jordan. More than a decade after the war in Syria began, it is still unsafe for refugees to return home. Nearly 6 million are living in neighbouring host countries, such as Jordan, where they struggle to meet their basic needs. Women whose husbands have died or have disappeared during the war find themselves in a particularly precarious situation. They have very few ways to earn money and are extremely vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. In challenging times like this is where cash assistance is one of the most efficient and dignified ways to deliver humanitarian aid. The Leading Women's Fund provides direct cash assistance to women who are heads of their households in Jordan. These funds give women the dignity of choosing how best to meet their family's needs, whilst also supporting the local economy. It's an incredible and life-changing contribution, and someone who has witnessed the direct impact of this support is Meta Carlson. As I mentioned earlier, Meta is UNHCR's head of cash-based interventions in Jordan. We really appreciate your time, Meta. And if anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A function. Okay, so I'll start off with my first question is just to get some background on you, Meta, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been working with Syrian refugee women in Jordan?
Sure. Thank you, Trudy, and thank you to the Leading Women's Fund. It truly is amazing the support that we are getting here from you all. And thank you for including me in the discussion. So as Trudy mentioned, I head up UNHCR's humanitarian cash assistance program here in Jordan. I'm relatively new to UNHCR and to Jordan, but I've been working on poverty issues and emergency and crisis response and recovery all over the world over the course of my long career, 20 plus years. Jordan is at a crossroads right now with the refugee population because it's not an acute crisis anymore. It's not Ukraine where you have people that are continuing to come. It's a relatively stable situation. So the humanitarian and development community is trying to find a way to help people move out of that crisis mentality, but more into sort of longer term solutions. So I came here because I am helping UNHCR to help transition, to help make this transition with the refugees so that they can build new lives. You know, as you had mentioned, the Syrian war it's going on its 11th and 12th year. There's no end in sight. So the challenge for us is how do we help the 700,000 Syrian refugees that are just registered with UNHCR to gain some level of independence, right? Create some level of hope so that they can invest in their and their children's futures. Since they can't go back to Syria, they can't go home and they won't be able to anytime soon.
And it's pretty amazing when you say 700,000 refugees in Jordan. Are
registered with UNHCR.
Yeah. So it's a huge number.
It is.
So, you know, why is cash assistance so important in this situation?
So we all need cash. All of us need cash, and particularly those that don't have a legal right to a bank account. Right? You need cash in order to survive. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, cash is not only, you know, if you think operationally, like, oh, it's easier for the delivery of cash. It's much more cost effective for us organizationally, but more importantly, it is what the refugees want. They've been at the whim of the world for so long, uprooted, you know, taken out of their homes and their families and their communities, thrust into these new environments. Giving them cash so that they can decide what their priorities are, when to spend the money, where to spend it, where to buy what they need. It's incredibly empowering, and it gives them a sense of dignity and independence that they haven't really had before, you know, because in the past, we would decide what they needed. You know, we would provide tents or blankets or whatever, but we're all human. We all have our own tastes and needs. And just because you have one need or one preference doesn't mean that I do. And so it's giving people their dignity of choice back. And it's one of the things that when I speak with the women refugees, they say is, you know, the most amazing thing about the cash, it's like, I decide. I decide what my family needs, not you, not my neighbors. I decide. And so that's incredibly empowering. And it's really important for their sense of self and their own agency.
And as you say, not everybody has the same family dynamics or needs. Can you sort of just tell us a little bit about what, you know, and cash assistance is not a never-ending stream either. So what do women mainly spend their cash assistance on?
So in Jordan, you know, Jordan imports everything it consumes. Its energy, its food, even its water. So the cost of living is really high. And for refugee women that get the cash assistance, they really just use it on the most basic survival needs. They use it to pay rent, and they use it to buy food. And if there's anything left, then they use it for medicine, education of their children, basic, you know, sanitary napkins. I mean, it really just is about survival. And they really do prioritize the most basic needs.
Okay, so we've got a short video now on cash assistance, and it might sort of help our participants understand it a bit more. And it's wonderful to have you all here today. Thank you. So we will play that video.
هاي هسه 11:45. هاي من بس هاي المساعدة الشتوية. إلا رب العالمين ييسر لنا أولاد الحلال وهي الحمد لله ربنا بعث لنا أولاد الحلال. بدي أأمن للشتاء، في للصيدلية عندي بدها منها، في مكسور علي أجار 3 شهور للبيت. هذا عندي هون البيت عم يدلف مي، بلكي إني أضبطه قبل الشتاء إن شاء الله يا رب. يا رب.
كان جوزي هو يأمن كل شيء، وهلأ أنا لوحدي يعني عم ربي عيلتي. أنا بالمساعدة المالية بقدر أنا أدفع على الأجار الأوتوكار. أنا بقول لهم لأولادي إنه أنا ما رح ورث لكم شيء، إنه بعد ما مات بيكون أنا ما رح ورث لكم شيء، أنا بقدر أعلمكم، بقدر أشتغل تعلمكم أنتم، بس تتعلموا أنتم من خلال شهاداتكم أنتم بتجيبوا اللي بدكم إياه.
They are able to go to the bank whenever they want to withdraw the money. It gives them dignity, and it gives them the freedom of choice, and it's really important for them.
ما بنزل، ما بروح بترجع حدا.
Thank you. I think, you know, that dignity piece comes through over and over again, doesn't it, in those videos? Meta, can you describe the economic conditions in Jordan at the moment and how they affect women who have, you know, refugees in Jordan?
Yeah, so Jordan is, Jordan is a middle income country. And as I mentioned, they import everything that they consume. So it's really expensive. The cost of living is really expensive. And there's very high unemployment. Youth unemployment is over 50%. So the impacts on women are most acute because usually when there's economic hardship, it falls on women disproportionately, right? Because there's less opportunities for women. There's the responsibilities of taking care of children, etc. Women's labor participation in Jordan is actually one of the lowest in the world for a country that's not at war. And part of this is some of the more conservative gender roles, but it's very, as we all know, it's very tied to education. So, for example, like women who have a high school education or less are less likely to engage in income generation opportunities or in the labor market, mostly due to social norms, but also due to poor public transportation, etc. Versus university graduates are much more likely to work, right? But the issue there is then unemployment. So there's just not a lot of opportunities and different restrictions in Jordan for Syrian refugees to work. So it's a challenge for refugee women in particular to be able to contribute to the household economy.
So it would make them very vulnerable. And you throw
Yes.
the COVID situation on top of that, and what does that do?
Well, I mean, I think we saw globally spikes in domestic violence and gender-based violence and child abuse during the COVID lockdowns. That was globally, and certainly Jordan was not immune to that. I mean, it cast so many people out of work and really put people, particularly women, in vulnerable situations. And, Jordan had one of the strictest COVID-19 responses. I mean, there was about 3 months when people were not allowed to leave their houses. Literally, they were not allowed to leave their houses. So when you have a household that really operates and survives on hand-to-mouth survival, everything they make in one day is what they eat. It really was absolutely devastating. And the result is what they've started to do is take on debt in order to eat, get food and shelter. So
just no choice there.
And it's a vicious cycle, right?
And when you've spoken to these women, do you feel like they have hopes of returning home to Syria, or do you think after this amount of time, where are they at?
The women that I have spoken to, especially the ones that came here that knew Syria before they left, they want to go home. I mean, of course they want to go home. It's what they know, it's what they love. But the challenge is, and the heartbreaking part of it is that those that came here as children, like small children, or those that have had children, while they're here, their children don't know Syria. And so they don't know what it is. They're not thinking about going back. And because there's no peace or durable solution in sight, the kids don't think of Syria as their home. And it's really heartbreaking for the women that came here. But they have a very bleak outlook. And that's what we're trying to work on as UNHCR and other humanitarian actors to help try to build some hope for the future.
And so can you talk a bit about the short-term and long-term plans that UNHCR has for women and families in Jordan, and how many people are waiting to get cash assistance?
The cash assistance waitlist is ever increasing. With the Ukraine crisis and the very high levels of food insecurity in other parts of the world, the world it's kind of on fire. So it's hard to keep people reminded that, the situation in Syria is still very serious, and there's still a lot of needs. So currently we have We support about 55,000 households with cash assistance in Jordan. And then this is just to cover their survival, part of their survival needs. So we have about 12 to 13,000 families that are that are eligible for cash assistance, but we just don't have enough money to support them. And that number, the list keeps growing with funding shortfalls and increasing needs in the country. But with UNHCR and other actors, we're trying to look to the future. So we've been moving towards mobile wallets as a way to give refugee households and refugee women access to be able to manage their money in a safe place, instead of walking around with cash. They're able to store their money, they're able to save their money, they're able to build a financial transaction history so that they can perhaps access microcredit, microfinance, start a small business. We're helping to connect refugee women to livelihood opportunities so that they can have sustainable incomes for their families. So we're really trying to help them move beyond just relying on humanitarian assistance in the short term, but actually building foundations for greater self-reliance and independence in the future.
And that mobile wallets would make big sense, wouldn't it, than going to the ATM, and as we saw in that video. That it's fantastic,
Yeah, absolutely. The mobile wallets is actually, it's revolutionary. I mean, it really changes it because it makes them even more independent. They really, truly can use the money when and where and how they want. They pay their utilities with it, so they save the money in transportation fees. They don't have to drag their children to the electricity company to pay the bills. Everyone can just live their lives. They can just make transfers. They can pay back their debt. So it really gives them so much more agency and control over their resources. It's truly phenomenal. And because it's cheaper to operate, more of the money that we give to them goes directly to them. Yep. Yeah. So it really is a game changer for the assistance.
Fantastic. Thank you, Meta.
Thank you.
Really interesting insights there on a complex situation. And we've had a couple of questions. One question is, there are a few groups that appear to be quite vulnerable: Uganda, Hazara, Afghans, Southeast Asian women. What can we do to help them? I guess what I would say, Shoba, is if you could go to our website, unrefugees.org.au. There's information around many of those situations. We probably won't be able to cover those today. There's a question from Noah: who's going to protect them from political persecution if they return home? Any negotiations or suggestions in this regard? I'm not sure, Meta, if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, UNHCR is not promoting returns to Syria for that very reason. And also, especially for young men, they will be recruited to the military. So our policy or approach at this point is really, we're not encouraging people to go back for these reasons because it isn't safe for them.
Yeah. And and that's 11 years on. Sadly, these situations just seem to be ongoing. So thank you, Meta. Thank you for answering that question from one of our participants. And now I'll go to Lynn Dang, who is joining us from Singapore. Lynn is the Human Resource Leader for Microsoft. She's also a valued member of the Australia for UNHCR board, a mother of two, and a former refugee from Vietnam. Lynn has also been one of the first Leading Women Fund members and is, of course, a strong advocate for refugee women. And, a big welcome, Lynn. Can you, I think it'd just be really fabulous if you can tell us a little bit about your experience as a refugee, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Trudy. And thanks for having me today. And thank you to all the participants joining as well. I mean, I work at Microsoft, so you think that one of the things I love to talk about externally is about technology, but actually this is always my favorite thing to talk about and always my favorite group, women supporting women. And so maybe to your question, Trudy, I might start at the very start of my life and really explain sort of the motivations I have around this and the experience of being a refugee myself and why it's really propelled everything I do, honestly, even at work now at Microsoft. So much of what I do there, it comes from the fact that I was a refugee. So thanks everyone for joining in. But as Trudy mentioned, I actually started my life out as a refugee, as a young child. My father was a soldier in the South Vietnamese army. And during that time, Vietnam, was in a decades war at the time. And we, unfortunately for the South Vietnamese, after the war, a lot of the soldiers were persecuted, and my father was one of them. So what had happened was that myself, my mum and dad, and my 3 sisters, and I was 4 at the time, and I even had a younger sister who was a baby at the time. We actually had to leave the country and go on a very unseaworthy boat in the middle of the night, sneaking out of the country and getting onto a boat. And we were on that boat with hundreds of other refugees at the time leaving. And we were on that boat for, almost a week. And I've always said that I've been really, truly one of the lucky refugees, because we were very fortunate to actually land in an island in Malaysia called the Pulau Bedong Island, and the UNHCR had set up a refugee camp there at the time. So as soon as we landed at the camp, one of the first things is obviously just, one, gratitude for making it, but things like medical attention, because everybody was dehydrated. We left with only the clothes on our back. So getting clothes, temporary accommodation. But we really felt fortunate because the family did all make it at one piece. And we've heard other horror stories as well. So I really feel lucky. And so we lived at that camp, and thank you to the work of the UNHCR. I mean, it really did say it saved my life and my family's lives as well. But we were there for about a year before we were thankfully resettled. You can tell by the heavy Australian accent that Singaporeans tell me that I have this Australian accent. But we were really fortunate to get humanitarian visas to Australia. And so that's when I took my first flight with my mum, sisters and dad. And I always say that I'm a Queenslander, so I don't know if there are many Queenslanders in the call, but we actually settled up in Brisbane first up, and I'm married to a Queenslander now as well. So what you will of that, how that came out. But we were in we first started living in Brisbane, and then I finally found my way through to Sydney, and my mum and dad, started a brand new life in Australia. They took up new trades. My sisters and I went to school, so I'm a huge advocate for public education, public housing. But essentially that was sort of like my start in life as a refugee. And over the course of my life, and I've always been a tech nerd, so now I work in a tech giant and, have been working successfully. But one of the things that I've always thought about was, with all the fortunate circumstances that I've had as a refugee, what does it actually mean, all this sort of like privilege and being able to have the advantages that I've had, if I'm not able to use that in a way to give back? And so that's sort of been the journey why I was very, when the Leading Women's Fund first started, just that opportunity to give back and to pay it forward. It's really sad at the moment that we have many crises happening, and as Meta shared in Syria, the war is still ongoing. It's not a safe environment to do. And so I think for someone like myself, and I know the stats are, we have 100 million people displaced, but I guess when it comes down to it, I really think about what is within my control. What do I have, like all the privilege and power that I have in life, the platforms I have that within control. So what is it that I can do in my power to give back? And if we all thought that globally, I mean, just imagine the collective impact we have. And even with just the Leading Women's Fund, since we've been doing this, Trudy, I've just been so inspired by the incredible women who've taken this journey of supporting other women. So I just wanted to share just sort of that motivation, why I'm so, I feel so fortunate as a lucky refugee, but also that's not enough. Like, what do I have to do personally to give back as well? Because, you know, the fact that I have the ability to, I really should use that.
Well, I think you're incredibly inspiring, and you certainly give back, and you give 110% to everything that you do. So, and, you know, it's wonderful to hear, you know, that you're in that position now because of the opportunities you were given. Unfortunately, resettlement is not an option for very many people these days, and it's less than 1% of people ever get resettled. So that's why the Leading Women Fund and supporting cash assistance for Syrian refugees in Jordan is so important. What can you tell us, Lynn, how important something like cash assistance for refugee women is, and around rebuilding their lives? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel fortunate, Trudy, because I actually think that the OG, the original refugee woman who has inspired my life is actually my own mother. I mean, she, you know, had to make decisions for the family when my dad was at war, when we resettled in Australia, when we were in the Malaysia camp. You know, she was taking care of us 4 girls. I myself am fortunate now to have 2 girls myself as well. And I just think that at the end of the day, the most inspiring people that I've met in my life, and I'm inspired by my mother as well, are refugee women. I mean, when you think that the incredible hardship and the circumstances that they find themselves in, the fact to have like the courage, the resilience, you know, the day-to-day, and because of the board work, I've met with a lot of refugee women as well. And I just think, like, I'm just constantly inspired that you can have these people in the most unfortunate circumstances, right, outside of their control, just extraordinary things that happen, and yet they are still the most courageous, you know, kind people, and they know what's best for them and their families. At the end of the day, like Meta said in the video, right, they have agency. They will know how best to spend that money. And for some people, it's sending their children to school. For some, it's setting up a business so that they can, you know, create a livelihood around that. But there is no better decision maker for these women than themselves. And I think our role, which is why I think cash assistance is so important, right, is that not only are we helping with whatever power that we individually have as well, but we're giving and we're empowering these women to transform not just their lives, but the communities around them as well. And I've certainly seen that happen. And I just think the more opportunity and the ways that we create that, what we have in our control as women, for these women, we're empowering them and they're making the best decisions for themselves. And I promise you that it's not just for themselves, but they're transforming communities as well. So I think at the end of the day, yeah, that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I think, you know, this is how we empower others through that.
And it's a very practical way to empower other, you know, women to, you know, lift their own communities. Thanks so much for that, Lynn. Really appreciate your personal story and your insights. Yeah, it's fantastic. As a part of signing up to the Leading Women Fund, members have the opportunity to use UNHCR's World First Connecting Worlds app. The app offers the unique opportunity to pair a Leading Women Fund member with a Syrian refugee woman in Jordan. It's an opportunity to connect and talk with a refugee woman still living in tough circumstances, hearing from her in her own words about her life, her journey, her dreams, her goals, and what you can learn from each other. And there are more similarities than differences, and how cash assistance is making a direct impact on her life. We are now going to see a short video on this World First app and how it's connecting women from across the world. Thank you.
So the Connecting Worlds app, we're very excited about the Connecting Worlds app. Essentially what it is, it's an app which allows direct communication between donors and refugees. So normally a donor would receive information from UNHCR, which would be written by ourselves, communicating about the life of a refugee or hearing a refugee's story in the written form. What this does, it allows an unfiltered connection. So refugees and donors can write to each other through the app. They can exchange image photos and share their lives with each other. So it's really about looking for common interests and building friendships between refugees and donors.
I didn't think I would get that close to someone who I didn't know, the other side of the world, so quickly.
أنا حسيت إنه كأنها أختي عم بحدث لها كل شيء بالبيت، يعني أول بأول نتواصل كأن أنا وياها أصدقاء، يعني كأننا نعرف بعضنا من زمان يعني.
Our primary interest, hers and mine, is family. So that instantly formed a bond because, you know, we both think that's the most important thing in our lives.
الصراحة يعني بدي إنه يجي المساء بسرعة عشان أحكي معاها ونتواصل أنا وياها، أطمن عليها تطمن علي، نشوف في جديد يعني بحياتي أو بحياتها يعني.
I was constantly looking to see if I had a click to say, yeah, you've got a message from Reem, and that was exciting.
ناخذ نعطي معاه عشان ناخذ منه فوائد بالحياة وهو ياخذ منا فوائد.
You read about refugees on the news, but to actually be in that close communication with one person is fantastic.
And the one thing that strikes me very much is that overwhelmingly we heard that refugees were saying it's the emotional support that is the most beneficial, that someone is asking them at the end of their day, how are you? And this really struck me, particularly these single mothers who no one's asking them at the end of the day. They're caring for children, they're looking after the household, they've lost their husband. So having someone check in at the end of the day means a huge amount more than we could imagine. So what we're really finding is that on both sides, this is a very, very valuable, informative and supportive relationships that are being built.
So I think that gives a really good sense of what the Connecting Worlds app is all about. There are limited spaces to sign up to the app this year. So if you are interested in joining the Leading Women's Fund, please follow the link that should be in the Q&A section. The QR code behind me, I'll point the right direction, there we go, or contact our colleague Teresa directly. Her email should be in the Q&A as well if you have any questions. I'd like to now welcome Graham Nye, who's one of our founding Leading Women Fund members, who I introduced a little bit earlier, and she will share her experience with the Connecting Worlds app. Kim's got quite a bio, so it's very impressive, Kim. So Kim is an entrepreneur, author, TEDx speaker and philanthropist who has always believed business needs to be a force for good. She is a recognised global leader in the circular economy and has been leading the fight against plastic waste for over 2 decades. Kim was invited to attend the World Economic Forum's annual agenda in Davos this year as a global top innovator, and was named as one of the world's top 100 designers by the UK's Design Council in 2021. She is passionate about supporting women, particularly refugee women, whose courage and strength is irrepressible. So a big welcome, Kim. And I know that you've been a member of the Leading Women Fund. You're in the founding 50. And you have been, have used the Connecting Worlds app 2 years in a row, I think. And can you tell us about what that experience was like and what you got out of it and how it appealed to you?
Yeah, even just watching that film, I kind of get choked up, even though I've seen it before. I'm a people person and I like connecting. So right out of the gate, when I heard about the Leading Women Fund, I heard about it in the same breath as they were talking about the app. So the app was an immediate draw for me, for exactly all of the reasons that Louise says in the film, right? That personal connection. And I think, as Lynn said, I'm, incredibly inspired by people who are strong and resilient and kind of badass, who, them against the world. I always find those kinds of people so encouraging to be around. And you realize that's every refugee woman, and particularly mother, right? I mean, they are just the most inspiring group on the planet. So their strength and courage and everything that Lynn said so eloquently. So I think the opportunity to connect on that personal level was really interesting to me. How the app itself was incredibly easy to use. It really does take you into a different space where it's only, I think the first year I did it for 4 weeks and the second year was 6 weeks. And for me, you do want it to go on. You don't want it to end. But it opens you into a whole other world that you can learn so much from. It's such a two-way exchange. Yeah, it's a phenomenal, kind of a life-changing experience. And if you're interested and you have the chance, please put your name down, because it's really something that I can't imagine you'd ever regret.
And Kim, what did you learn from your match? Or your two, both of your matches, but we call them matches, but yeah.
Oh, my first match, Aisha. Just again, that strength that women are so capable of of doing so much, the strength that we have within ourselves. And this, for her, she was pregnant with her 4th and 5th child with twins when her husband was taken. She found out he died right after they were born. And that's when she decided that's it. It's not safe for her anymore. She was going to make the journey to Jordan. Started that with 2 newborns and 3 young children. I think they were all under the age of 9 when she left. One didn't survive the journey, one of her older children. So I mean, just getting to Jordan, and this was 11 years ago. And I think, I remember at the time when the Syrian crisis started, we were in the baby business. So we work with moms. So everyone's kind of rallying and you're fundraising and doing different events, and you kind of have this focus on it. For looking back, I feel really bad. It was just a few months, and then we kind of move on to the next project and next thing and business and kids. And suddenly here I was going, oh my gosh, this was 10 years ago. My life moved on, and her kids were the same age as mine. And just that, I certainly had guilt around it, that I was able to move on and then think about what the last 10 years for my kids were like versus her kids. So there was definitely reflection, but also, to Lynn's point, how do you then use the privilege that we have to kind of get involved? And one of the things I love about the fund is it's not just writing a check. There's 1,000 different amazing organizations that you can do that for. But I really was drawn to the idea that this is a group of people around the Leading Women Fund who are interested in more than that. It's connecting with the donors themselves. That's amazing. It's connecting with each other as a group of women, which isn't something I've seen in any other NGO or kind of donor organization, where the people themselves are also a draw, because all of us, and I think, just hearing Meta's story today, and Lynn, anyone who works in the space, Trudy, Emma, Alexandra, like everybody here is interested and interesting and kind of, rolls up your sleeves and wants to get involved. So we have something in common. So I think that was another big piece of what was appealing about the fund. And then the cash assistance. I learned that last, actually. And I love what that does for women. I couldn't imagine, on top of everything else, feeling like I'd lost my independence. That would be really hard for so many people. So I love that element of it as well. I'm a huge fan.
it's very powerful. And you know what would you say to other fund members around building a connection with their refugee match? What worked well, and was it different each time for you?
They were very different personalities. And as I said, I'm a people person. So I think I had to be mindful of not being too like, you know, asking a million questions and overwhelming someone, because I'm a stranger to them, of course, and not everyone dives in deep right away, you know, and wants to be vulnerable or share a lot. Or my first match did, my second one less so. So just trying to take their lead, go at their pace. So if they just want to chit chat about recipes, you know, I'm a terrible cook, but I was always happy to, you know, that seemed to be a topic that both of mine really enjoyed talking about. It's such a central part of their lives. So follow their lead, really, as opposed to thinking of it from your own standpoint, because really there's so much, as I said, it's such a two-way relationship where you can get so much out of it on both sides.
No, that's fantastic. And you know, what's made it, I guess the practical nature of the Leading Women Fund and the app and that connection has, you know, has kept you involved, and each time's been quite different and interesting, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely do it again. I am mindful though, when you say there's limited spots, it's like, oh, well, I've had 2 go. So, you know, you want to make sure everyone else gets their turn of it. But I would do it as often as I was able to. If there was, you know, more people on the other side and you were looking for more, I'd always put my hand up. I think that from the fun standpoint, it's funny that it's called Connecting Worlds app, because I think for me, what's at the magic of this fund is the connection. As I said, you've got the connection with the individual on the other side, but then the connection with each other. And even how, you know, I don't know if I've never probably said this to you guys, but you organize the different events so regularly where you get to hear stories. And I mean, you know, I'm humbled to be on the panel with Meta and Lynn, you know, who are so inspiring themselves, and hearing, you know, you have these teas where you can join in and hear stories from people on the ground in Jordan, or different, you know, webinars that you're hosting. So there's like an educational element, but it's not a passive. I feel like everything we do, we're connecting with the topic, with each other, with learning, growing. Yeah, I find it a really unique setup that you've created with the Leading Women Fund, which is, you know, why I said, yeah, I'm absolutely a huge fan of it, and where I think it can go in the next few years, especially because, as we were talking about, the need is growing exponentially with where the world is at. And I think that there's so many women in Australia who would love to do more. And I think it's a great avenue to do it.
Thank you so much, Kim, for your passion. And I know why you were at Davos and you got, what was the other one? The Global Top Innovator. Like, how impressive. Thank you so much. So you've heard from our panel this afternoon about the Leading Women's Fund and how it is empowering Syrian refugee women in Jordan with cash assistance. And maybe you've heard you know, things here that have got you thinking about how you can be a part of the change, part of a movement of women dedicated to helping women and girls rebuild their lives after hardship that very few of us will encounter in our lives. As Meta mentioned earlier, there's 12,000 families who are still waiting on the cash assistance list in Jordan. And if you're wanting to be a part of the long-term solution for refugee women, we'd like to encourage you to consider joining the Leading Women Fund to provide long-term support for Syrian women in Jordan and other projects as the fund grows. To be a part of the fund, we're asking members to provide a regular donation. A donation of $230 every 4 weeks is enough to help a refugee woman and her family live with dignity and security. Or a donation of $140 every 4 weeks will support a Syrian woman in Jordan to provide essentials for herself, such as food and bills. Alternatively, you might like to support the Leading Women Fund with a special one-off donation. For example, $256 can cover rent for a refugee family for 1 month, or $165 can provide a gas heater to keep a family warm during the cold, harsh winter, which is on its way again. So to join the Leading Women Fund now or find out more, please follow the link in the Q&A or contact my colleague, Teresa, directly. Her email is also in the Q&A. Or if you like a QR code, the one behind me, you can use as well. So your gift is a direct investment in a human being, a woman who will have the opportunity to thrive, not just survive. And I think we've really heard that from all of our panelists this afternoon, that importance of empowering women. And we've seen it time and time again in displacement situations all across the world. When you empower a woman, you empower a whole community. We've got some other questions in the Q&A here, and I think I've got one for Meta, which is just around how do we make sure that, you know, when we're doing cash assistance, how do we make sure that it's going where it needs to go, Meta?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's an important question because there's accountability there, right? Not just to the people that provide the funding, but also to the people that are receiving it, right? We want to make sure that the right people get the assistance that they need. So we do this in a wide variety of ways, but it's really about targeting, being able to prioritize those people with the greatest need. Globally, our experience is that if you target well and select the people in the right way based upon their needs, they're going to use the money in the way that you intended. I think we do a lot of what we call post-distribution monitoring. So after a household receives their money, then we go and we ask them, you know, what did you spend it on? How did you spend it? What are your needs? What are your priorities? So we do sort of those pieces. And then when it comes to mobile money, you know, UNHCR has very strict data protection and data privacy protocols, very strict in place. So we get data from the mobile wallet financial service provider, but it's at a trend level, not at an individual level. So we know that with the households that are receiving the money, for example, through mobile wallets, we know that there's starting to be an increase in the number of households that are using the wallets to pay for their utilities, or they're using it for person-to-person payments for the payments of rent. So we're able, as we move more towards these digital solutions, we're able to actually extract sort of higher level data that informs us about how people are using it. But we also see it when we go to the households, like they have very few resources and they really do prioritize a safe place to live, for sure. We know this.
Yeah. And another question we've got is just how do we empower women? And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the like women learning skills so that they can make money themselves, and some of those things. I can't even think of the proper word for that right now, but could you talk a little bit about that, Meta?
Sure. So UNHCR is working with a wide variety of actors in this space in terms of helping people to build the skills and capacity and experience and access the opportunities they need to generate income on a sustainable level, like to be able to invest in their capacity, to be able to make money, support their families, make good choices, and make the choices that they want to make in life. So there's, but it's limited based upon what they can do here in Jordan. So Syrian refugees in Jordan can work, but they can only work in a very limited number of sectors, and they tend to be sectors that are very seasonal, like agricultural workers, or it's related to daily labor, right? One day you work, one day you or very low paying jobs like cleaning the streets or things like this. So it really is limited, but we're making a concerted effort and investments in investing in women's home-based businesses, right? To be able to facilitate women being able to generate some income while they're at home, right? That doesn't require them to travel somewhere or have to pay for childcare expenses, etc., so that they can generate. And a lot of this is like small things, like, you know, making small household products like soaps or detergents, or making food. That's a really big one, right? Like being able to just open their kitchen window and when people go by, they sell food. So it's being able to provide them with that opportunity, whether it's seed funding or whether it's like actual inputs or training in, you know, what is business planning and how do you manage your expenses and your projected needs, right? So it's about building their capacity to be able to think like a businesswoman, right? That's where we want to go.
Yeah, using their entrepreneurial skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Kim, I've got a question here just around the language you communicate with on the app. How does that work?
Well, luckily the app designers are brilliant. So you write in English, and then there's a translator in between. So there's a delay. It's not instantaneous. When you heard the women in the video talking, you know, I would send a message that night and I would wake up and it would take 24 hours then to get the message back, you know, and then you immediate reply and you wait another 24 hours because in between there's the translators, and that translator does two things. One, it's not AI, it's a person. They're translating for context, but they're also just making sure that everything's culturally appropriate. And I think that's really to safeguard both sides potentially, so that no one ends up in an uncomfortable scenario for whatever it might be. So there is this kind of in-between person, as direct as it is, but it doesn't feel like they're intruding in any way. And I think that, you know, I mean, most people, I can't imagine there would be too many issues, but there is that safeguard just as a step. So you just write it in English and get responses in English.
Yeah. So that's good. So I'm mindful of time, and I just wanted to say a really big thank you to our panel. Thank you. You've been very generous with your time, Meta, Lynn and Kim. And Kim's product is G Diapers. I'll put in a plug there for you as well.
We're not available in Australia. So
no, they're not available in Australia, but worth looking up. But, you know, thank you all so much for your time. Keep up the great work, Meta, in Jordan. It's such important work that you do. And, you know, it's really been fantastic to learn more about the program in Jordan, the Leading Women Fund, and the impact it can make. Thank you to everybody who's joined us today. It's really fantastic that you've had the interest to join us and to learn more about the Leading Women Fund and how if you join, you can promote gender equality and provide opportunities for refugee women and girls. Again, I'll just reiterate that in the Q&A there, you'll have Teresa's email address and go to the QR code or put it in a question and we'll get back to you. Thank you also for your questions today. They've been really terrific. I haven't been able to get to all of them, but we will endeavour to respond to the rest of those questions. So I think we'll finish with, together we stand in solidarity with refugee women as they seek their own financial security. Together we can empower refugee women to live a life that's full and successful. And thank you to all of our supporters today. We look forward to welcoming many more to the Leading Women Fund. If you are interested, please let us know. We'd love to have a chat. Thanks everybody, really appreciate your time. Have a good day, Meta. Have a great day, Lynn. Thanks very much, Kim.